I just wanted to ask first how you came to be aware of this particular story.
A lot of research. I was interested in the subject matter. I'm a history buff. I was particularly fascinated by the John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, which I'm surprised is not better known, in America. And then, I'd always been fascinated. I've seen all these movies made about slavery, some of the really excellent movies, but most of them dealt with the injustice and suffering of the slaves, as opposed to slaves fighting back. So I was interested in telling a story about slaves that actually, fought back and succeeded. And the fact that, and we did a lot of research and we came across very little known. Hopefully after this movie, he'll be much better known. Shields, where he fought back, he escaped, he succeeded. And more importantly, he could have really, at that time, the slaves would go to Canada. He could have moved to Canada and lived happily ever after, as many did. He actually chose to come back and fight and risk his life. So I thought, okay, this is about as heroic of a journey as you can get.
Yeah, because in the narration at the start, they said I think there's that line that says, how important it is for stories like this to be told from the Black perspective, from the African American perspective, because so often over time we've seen this kind of whitewashing of historical kind of stories. How important is that for you, that Black people are at the centre now of their own story, out of the centre of their own history?
Well, I think that with any history, it's important to, as they always say that history is written by the victors. I think in any history, to get a real balance, I think you need to hit both sides. And you don't even need to change the facts. You can put little angles or little touches here and there, which biases the history. So to me, this was very important that we tell this story from totally, African Americans' point of view. As you notice, a lot of these movies are also about white saviors, and we were trying to avoid that as well. So we thought that was really important.
Yeah, obviously, this cast is full of really young, exciting kind of talents and some really great performances. But there is also the kind of old guard in there as well. I was just wondering about balancing that as a director on set, these kind of young, kind of up and coming performers, but then the likes of James Cromwell and Bruce Dern, who have been around the block, and back again, So I'm just wondering about that kind of balance for you in directing people that have been there and done it, and some people that were at the early stages of their career.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, one thing, when I was researching, reading about directors, I don't remember who said, one director said, look, if you just cast talented actors, the job of directing them becomes so much easier. I think I got extremely lucky in terms of the young people. Dayo, our lead, he was really the most difficult one, because a lot of people told me you got to get big name actors and famous actors to make. But as a first-time director, it's hard to do that. So we decided to go for just somebody who's super talented. We auditioned literally over 2 months. I would say 20, 30 actors, and the Dayo was just head and shoulder above everyone. And he got it. He knew the story. He was really passionate. He loved the script. So. Then the other pieces kind of started falling in place. I mean, we knew we wanted a young person, a young, beautiful woman to play the slave in the plantation where he sleeps in. And we got lucky. Cat Graham, who's pretty well known, came along. Then Naturi Naughton, who's a lead in Power, which is a huge hit on Stars. She came along. They simply responded. So these were experienced actors. But I can tell you, they require very little direction. It's just putting him in the right content. And also, a lot of them came through with some really good ideas. And then in terms of Bruce Dern, James Cromwell, and Mykelti Williamson, who plays, I forgot the actor's name, who betrays him basically. I don't know if you recognize him. He's Bubblegum Shrimp from...
Mykelti, yeah.
So those people, they just they just called me, my casting director said, these people want to do it and you want to see it. I said, look, oh my God, it's so lucky to have this kind of experienced, proven actors who really want to be in my movie. As it turned out, James Cromwell is a real history buff, and he really knows that part of history, and he contributed a lot with authenticity of some of the dialogue between him and between John Brown and Frederick Douglass, and also between John Brown and Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned that it's a first-time director, but obviously you've been in the industry for a number of years. Have you always wanted to direct, and why now? What was it about this project that made you finally feel like taking that leap?
No, I would say I started thinking about directing maybe a few years ago. Not always. I was happy producing, and some great projects I'm proud of, and. But at some point I reached a point in my life, I said, okay, there are stories I want to tell, and I wasn't seeing anybody else telling them and the way I wanted to tell it. So my friend said, look, you should do it. I'd written some of the scripts that actually got produced. I gave a lot of input, was on the set. So I figured, you know what, it's one of those bucket list things. If I don't do it, I'm going to regret it on my deathbed. So decided to do it. And to be honest with you, and I did a little short just to experience, and I realized I don't like directing. I'm not in love with the act of directing. I was so tiring on the set, exhausted. You go on 4 or 5 hours of sleep for months. So I came to the conclusion, if I'm going to direct, it's not going to be because I want to direct. It's going to be because the story that I want to tell, and I think I can tell it the way I want to tell it. So that's my motivation. If I direct again, it's going to have to be a project that I really think, a story that needs to be told, and I feel like I can tell it in a certain way.
And obviously with COVID, it's changed the whole landscape of film and release dates this year. It's all kind of been thrown up in the air. I'm just wondering about your thoughts on this film's release, because obviously, over here in the UK, this might be a film I traditionally would have seen on the big screen, but I've seen obviously as a digital release. And I'm just wondering about your thoughts on that, and if actually you think it makes it easier accessible to audiences when it's sort of digital, or if you were quite disappointed when you found out it might not get the global kind of big screen release you anticipated.
Well, what happened with I don't know if you know this, the movie was slated, we were scheduled for release on March 20th on 700 screens in the United States, then we were going to go out internationally. And then on March 16th, the order came down to close the cinemas. So we literally 4 days before our release date. And the theatrical release is kind of like a locomotive that drives the publicity and everything. So without that, it becomes more difficult for a smaller movie to be put on the map and to get attention. So because of that, I would say, I don't know how it's going to happen. But on the other hand, I'm glad this whole digital alternative is available and it's accessible at a very reasonable price to people all over the world. So it all depends. I don't know where it's going to end up. Right now, obviously, shooting movies is much more difficult, especially like there's no way we could shoot this movie with this many extras and battle scenes and chase scenes and stuff like that. And they're simply not possible to be COVID-19 compliant and shoot a movie like that. You could shoot a movie in a small scale with a few people in locations, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you're quite worried about the future of the film industry for the kind of smaller budget movies, because we saw with obviously Disney putting Mulan on Disney Plus, and it feels like that this maybe something's been accelerated of late that might have happened anyway, which is that the cinema going public it's becoming less to see, and there's more films being diverted to streaming sites. Are you worried about the future sort of post-COVID for films like Emperor and kind of films of that budget and where they might end up in the future?
In fact, a movie like any movie of scale, like I said, you've got action, chase, and extras. It's going to be really difficult to do. Interestingly enough, I think there might be an opportunity for very small contained films, because you can do it under controlled circumstances. Let's say if you want to have a movie like a domestic drama, that's much easier to do. So I think in terms of small indie films that don't require scale and scope, it's going to be easier. They may even have a better opportunity because there's not as much competition from big, Marvel type kind of movies. But these medium-sized movies like Emperor, where they're indie movies, but hopefully you thought they look like a big studio movie with chases, action, extras, battle scenes and stuff. I think that those are going to be the more difficult ones to make.
Yeah. So I was looking across your kind of credits as a producer, and you've got this incredibly eclectic range of fantastic projects across your career. And I just wondered what drives you towards a story and towards a project? Because if you look at your all of the stuff you've been involved in, there's not like a continuing thread of something that you can go, oh, that's a Mark Amin film. They all seem so different to one another, and I was just wondering what appeals to you and what connects you to these projects.
Well, my background is in distribution. I started in this business, distribution. I started a small distribution company called Trimark, which we merged with Lionsgate. I was with Lionsgate for 9 years. So as a distributor, you literally end up going with whatever movie you think can do box office or be successful. But then along the way, your own personal taste interferes. And there's some movies that they may not necessarily be commercial potentials, but you do it because you think it's so good. I mean, the best example, a movie called Eve's Bayou, which is one of the movies I'm really proud of. We did when I was distribution. That movie didn't fit any of the boxes of a commercial movie. But I read the script, said, my God, this is fantastic. I met with the director, said, okay, she's the first-time director, but I think she can do it. We made the movie, and the movie became a surprise success and critically acclaimed and everything. So when you look at my track record, it's a combination of what was done because we thought it would have a good potential box office sales, and how my personal taste interfered with it. And movies like Frida, like Eve's Bayou, like Good Kill. These are movies that it was really more my personal taste. But along the way, sometimes we get I would get projects that I would get executive producer credit on because we thought it was just a good movie to make and not necessarily a passion project. So that's why it's an eclectic thing,
So just very finally, before I go, just thinking about looking at what's coming up for you in the future, just wondered if what is kind of coming up, if you've got any kind of projects in the pipeline. Also, according to the trusty source that is IMDb, you were attached to this Zorro reboot. I just wondered what the kind of status is with that, because I interviewed Gael Garcia Bernal a couple of years ago and asked him, and he still had hopes it could take place one day. I just wondered where that is in development and if it might still happen.
Yeah, we have typically, like anyone in Hollywood, we have multiple projects at different stages of development. And this business, the nature of the business is that you never know which one is going to get financing, is going to get the right cast or get the right director, because obviously I'm directing very few things myself. So that is driven to some degree by hapstance and luck and everything. But in case, so we'll see. We have like about, I would say, 10, 15 projects in various stages. Some of them are ready, some cast attached and everything ready to go. But in case of Zorro, is something we've been working on, and it's a reboot and reimagining of Zorro. It's really futuristic Zorro. It still has this theme of fighting injustice and a successful person fighting for the underclass, which has always been kind of close to my heart. So we're taking a very fun ride. By the way, that's true to the character of the original black and white Zorro TV series as well. But we're making it setting it slightly in the future. And we're talking with some studios right now. Hopefully we can get it going soon. Again, it's going to be subject, that's the big scale movie. It's going to be subject to the ability to shoot that scale of a movie with these circumstances.
Yeah. So you think Zorro? So could that potentially be one that is shot under new COVID guidelines? Is it that close potentially?
I think we actually mentioned we're thinking about that, and if we decide to go under COVID guidelines, we are working. We may have to do a lot more visual effects than we normally would. The truth is, you can do even a kissing scene and a sex scene without people touching each other. It's just really difficult, but it can be done. You know what I mean? So it depends on how long this lasts, but we are in the creative business. If this thing lasts for another 6 months or a year, I think people will figure out a way to make just about any kind of movie. It would be a lot more visual effects than we're used to.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank you very much, Stefan.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.